to Ghost Stories for Christmas 2023. I'm Thomas Joyce and I'll be reading My Love Has Left Me by Charlotte Bond. It might be blowing a gale and hammering the window with rain, but inside the Collingwood house all was warm and bright. In the dining room the fire crackled merrily in the grate, the tree was bedecked with coloured ribbons and biblical carvings, no robins or glitzy baubles. Jacob Collingwood would not permit such frivolities. And even the ceiling was lent colour by the paper chains hanging there. Hannah and her 3 siblings had laboured hard on the decorations each day when the younger ones came home from school, and Hannah came home from work at Milner's, Grocers and Consett. But to Hannah's eyes the most beautiful part of the dinner table was the set of crackers, one placed on each plate. She had been setting aside a little of her wages every week since August to buy them, her gift to the family. It seemed that each year their God-fearing father, the emphasis on the fearing, would declare something at Christmas to be too frivolous to celebrate the birth of our Lord. Crackers had been outlawed 3 years ago, but at 16 now and going out to work every day, Hannah had taken the rebellious view that some of the money she earned should be hers to spend as she pleased. Either she was a child who didn't work and was told what to do, or she was an adult earning a wage and had some say over her own tastes and inclinations. Still, she felt a growing apprehension as the hour of Christmas lunch drew closer when her father would come face to face with her boldness. Was she too old for a spanking? Yes, she was. Still. Sarah Collingwood was in the kitchen, busy with the turkey. Mrs. Jordan, who came to help with the cleaning, had been in yesterday to help peel vegetables, scrub pots, prepare the stuffing and polish the tableware. But today she was naturally with her own family, so Sarah had all to do. With one last anxious look at the crackers, Hannah went to help her mother. But as she passed the dining room window, a strangeness made her stop and look out. Movement where there should have been only open sky had caught her attention. There was a tree at the top of Hanged Man's Hill. She stared at it, puzzled but not alarmed. How had a whole tree grown up overnight? Surely it was impossible. But then, didn't there used to be? Hannah! Her mother's voice from the kitchen denied her any more time to ponder the mystery, and she hurried to where she was needed. As was the custom, Hannah stood at the dinner table waiting with her mother and siblings James, 10, and the twins Levi and Leah, 6, until their father entered the room. Jacob Collingwood was a tall, thin, severe man who lived for the written word of both the English law and God on high. His tempers were infrequent but terrible when they struck, and so Hannah held her breath as his eyes swept over the table. He nodded at what he saw, then sat down, at which point the children all did the same while Sarah remained standing to serve everyone. While Jacob may not have objected to the crackers, he ignored the rest of the family when they pulled theirs. His remained untouched by his side, and he concentrated on eating while the others examined what they'd gotten. "I have a girl's ring," Levi complained. "I'll swap you," Leah said, offering up a miniature set of wooden skittles. "I've got a pencil," James said, looking pleased. "That'll be most useful for school, and there's a poem as well." "Me too," Hannah said, delighting in their joy. "Read yours first, James." James cleared his throat and pulled back his shoulders. He had his sights set on the bar or politics and was always eager to practice his public speaking, regularly offering to read passages of the Bible at the Sunday dinner table. "My love has left me all alone, to wander far with piteous moan. The cold earth holds no joy for me, but lo, there stands a mighty..." Their father had stopped eating. Their mother, it seemed, had stopped breathing. And all at once Hannah remembered why there was no tree on Hanged Man's Hill and how her mother had been the cause of that. "Show me that," Jacob snapped, extending his hand. Trembling a little, James handed over the poem. The twins were staring at their plates and Hannah's heart was racing. She glanced out of the window again at the tree that shouldn't be there. The presence of that poem, that epitaph, in the cracker and the reappearance of the tree couldn't be coincidence, could they? Jacob scowled as he read the poem, then he scrunched the paper and cast it into the fire. "I don't know where you got those foul things from," Jacob said to his wife, "but they were a waste of money. Everyone burn them, now." Sarah's eyes flicked to Hannah, who thought for a moment her mother might cast her in the way of Jacob's cold fury. But instead she said quietly, "Do as your father says, children." In utter misery, Hannah watched her gifts burn and crumble to ash. As the sun was setting on Christmas Day, Jacob came out of his study and said, "Let us burn the last of the Yule logs, shall we?" The children cheered, as most children will do at favourite Christmas traditions, but Hannah glanced at her mother. She knew the story behind the Yule log. Each log they burned came from a sycamore tree that had been cut down many years ago. A sycamore tree where Noah Lumley had hanged himself after his sweetheart left him for another. He'd chosen a tree on a hill visible from his sweetheart's new home, so that she might constantly see it and be reminded of her treachery. Jacob had ordered that tree felled even before Noah's body was in its grave. None of the locals wanted the wood, claiming that it was cursed, so most of it was sold at Durham Market a few days later. But Jacob had kept several logs, bringing one out each Christmas to burn. "God's grace at this holy time of year will keep us safe from ridiculous superstitions," he declared. And despite the portentous whispers of the locals, Jacob and his new family thrived while Noah Lumley was mostly forgotten, lying in the graveyard with the final poem he'd written, his love, carved as his epitaph. Forgotten, that is, until that same poem had been read out at the Collingwood Christmas dinner table. Hannah knew the end of the poem. She'd learned it off by heart once, kneeling next to Noah's grave. She'd been intrigued by this piece of history that touched her mother before Hannah was even alive. No doubt it was the ending that now turned Sarah pale and prompted her to say, "Perhaps we should choose a different log, just this once." Jacob glared at her. "It's the final piece. After today, the matter is done and buried, just like him." Sarah winced at such bluntness. The children looked confused, since they were unaware of the legend attached to those logs. Never a man to be put off from doing what he wished, Jacob Collingwood went to the woodshed and fetched the final sycamore log. He placed it in the hearth, and each of the children took turns to sprinkle a few of last year's ashes over the log, a symbol to keep their good luck continuing. "I'm surprised you allow such a pagan rite in your own home," Sarah said bitterly. Such an accusation caused everyone in the room to still immediately. "Now that the logs are gone, I hope we can cease with the tradition." Jacob gave her a long, cold look, then said, "As you please," before disappearing into his study again. After a moment's silence, Hannah got to her feet and urged her siblings, "Come on, you lot, the log's catching, let's sing We Wish You a Merry Christmas like you're supposed to." The children all dutifully sang and then retired to various parts of the room to play with new Christmas toys. Sarah remained sitting, her gaze locked on the fire, her fingers gripping the arm of the chair. Hannah sat and watched her mother, hoping that her watchfulness would act as a barrier, keeping the misery on her mother's face from infecting her siblings. Hannah had hoped that the disquiet she felt would be banished when she went to bed, but while the others snored softly around her, she lay wakeful, staring at the ceiling. The rain had stopped, but the wind still raced around the house, causing strands of ivy to strike the window now and again, as if someone stood without, tapping on the pane. Close to midnight, Hannah rose and crept out to the landing window, pulling aside the curtain to stare out at the Hanged Man's Hill. The wind tugged clouds across the sky, covering and uncovering the moon. The landscape was dark when she first looked out, but then the moon appeared and she saw the sycamore tree standing tall on its hill. Whilst every other tree and bush outside swayed and shook in the wind, the sycamore remained as still as if it stood on a summer's day. Yet there was movement on it. She saw a man's body hanging from the lower branches, the head tilted to the side by the rope around his neck. Clouds briefly obscured the sight, and Hannah felt saliva flood her mouth as if she might be sick. "I must have imagined it though," she told herself, and indeed, when the moonlight returned, she saw the tree had no corpse swinging from it. Noises from below made her turn, startled, to the stairs. She'd heard the sound of the rake on the fire along with whispered words. Her heart jolted. "It's Noah, come to claim Mama." But then she discerned it was Sarah's voice she was hearing, not that of a stranger. Still uneasy, Hannah crept downstairs and found her mother kneeling before the dining room fire, casting something onto it just as Hannah entered the room. "Mama, are you all right?" Hannah asked as Sarah rose, smoothing down her nightdress. "I'm fine," Sarah said, her voice strained. "Why are you out of bed?" "Why are you?" Hannah challenged. It was not in her nature to be so rude to her mother, but it had been an unsettling day, and sleep was clawing at her mind, even as her agitated nerves kept her awake. "Go to bed," Sarah said, walking past her daughter and heading upstairs. She must have been in a most distracted state of mind as she'd left behind the candle she'd brought with her. Waiting until she heard her mother's bedroom door shut, Hannah knelt down by the hearth, brought the candle closer, and immediately identified what her mother had thrown onto the ashes: the poem from the cracker. It must have fallen down the back of the grate away from the fire, since only the outer edges were charred. The words remained perfectly legible, and Hannah read them knowing that she shouldn't. "My love has left me all alone, to wander far with piteous moan. The cold earth holds no joy for me. But lo, there stands a mighty tree, whose branches like wide open arms will keep me from both hate and harm. In death's embrace I'll wait for thee, to dwell in blackest hell with me." Blackest hell. The phrase made a shiver run down Hannah's spine. She could only imagine what it did to her mother, about whom the poem was written. Hannah had never dared ask Sarah exactly what had happened, and asking her father was, of course, out of the question. But she'd encountered Noah's sister once at the man's graveside. She'd been a short, plump woman who had sounded not angry but resigned as she related the tale. "Noah and I shared everything," she'd said, staring at the headstone as if she told her story to the wind and the sky rather than the girl before her. Sarah was to meet him, he said, by the sycamore, and they would elope. Only she didn't come, and he found out later she was engaged to Jacob Collingwood. After they were married, he would stand there every Sunday from midday to dusk, watching the house. Jacob tried to move him several times, but my brother always returned. Then one day he hanged himself right there where he'd been keeping watch. I think it was so he would never be forced to leave that spot again. That poem there, she gestured to the headstone, he made 3 copies of. He sent one to Sarah, had a copy in his pocket, and left a copy on his bed, instructing that it be carved on his gravestone. Our parents were against it, but I slipped the mason a few of my own shillings, and it was carved just as he'd wanted. From the hallway came a cry, a pause, a thud, and then the creak of rope. "Mama!" Hannah cried, leaping to her feet, certain in her mind's eye of what had happened. But the hallway was empty. For a moment she stood in stunned silence, looking around for a hanging body. She was sure she had to be there. Above her, a door opened and Jacob peered over the banisters. "Hannah, what was that thud?" "I don't know," Hannah said, perplexed and afraid. Jacob scowled. "Burglars, perhaps. Wait there, girl." He disappeared into his room and she heard him speak. Sarah's name, commanding at first, then angry. When he appeared at the top of the stairs with a sturdy candlestick held as a weapon, he said, "Your mother isn't here. Help me find her." A search of the house revealed no Sarah. A search of the garden revealed the same. Jacob roused his neighbours and they searched again with the same results. Thoroughly awake now due to the commotion, Hannah's siblings came sleepily downstairs. Not telling them what was going on, Hannah made them warm milk and set James to reading while Levi and Leah played checkers. For her part, Hannah paced the room and waited. Upon hearing the front door open, she hurried from the parlour into the hallway, just as the search party came in. She saw her mother's body almost the exact same moment the others did. Suspended from a rope attached to the upstairs banisters, Sarah's body hung heavy in the stairwell. All present gazed at it in silence, and Hannah could only think of the sounds she'd heard from the dining room. The cry, the thump and creak of this very scenario. Without realising it, they had been searching for a dead woman all this time. Wordlessly, Hannah went back into the parlour and, ignoring the questions of her brother, looked out of the window. On the hill stood the tree, only now 2 bodies were hanging from its lower boughs. The vision blurred as Hannah's eyes filled with tears. Darkness swallowed the land for a moment, but once revealed again, the tree and the bodies were gone.